Hey, another video. Today we have transmission. This is the F5M42 gearbox off of Lancer Ralliart 04 to 06. So I'm going to show you guys how to take one of these bad boys apart. I just pulled it out. So we'll get started. But before we do, there's a couple things you need to see. So right here, everybody should be familiar with this. It's your clutch fork. Alright, so this is the front of the transmission. What we have over here is 3 detents. These go into spots on your shift rails, and they hold the shift fork in the position for the desired gear that you're in. The other thing, so those have to come out. This here is your reverse stoplight or reverse light switch, and back here, right above the differential, is your speedometer sensor. We have our control housing, gear shift. Okay, so these two sensors need to come out. The 3 detents. The control housing has to come out. To remove this, there's 4 flange bolts. You got to take this little bracket here off for this shift lever, which is your side to side, and then you can take these 4 bolts off and pull that out once you take this bolt out, which retains the control housing and keeps it aligned. Down here, you notice the fill plug. Also, this guy right here, it's actually a Torx. Can't remember the size, but I'll let you know later in the video. This needs to come off. That actually holds in your reverse idler gear. Don't take this out until you've opened the bottom inspection cover. I'll show you that right now. Okay, so here, driver's side axle plugs in here. This inspection cover, there's 6 bolts. You got to take them off, and then you'll see the reverse idler gear. Pull this bad boy out, and then you can remove the reverse idler from here prior to splitting the case. Other than that, the only other thing you got to remember is all these bolts around here where the case splits. You gotta take all of them out. There's a whole bunch, but do not forget this one and that one. I don't know if you can see that, but there is 2 bolts on the inside that hold your case together. If you don't take those 2 out and you try to split your case, you're gonna break it. So yeah, we'll get started. Okay, so here got the 6 small bolts of this bottom inspection plate. It's kind of hard. It can be hard to take off. It's got all this layer of sealant holding it on. It's just a gasket you make yourself. Pull this off. What do we got here? So, kind of hard to see. I'll turn you into the light. There we see inside the transmission. This guy right here, that's your reverse idle, or the reverse idler. So in here you can see some synchros, sleeve. So again, you see where that bolt comes through right underneath here. That goes to the side of the case. That's that guy right there. So we'll pull that out next. Okay, so here we go. Right here. I don't know if you can see that. This is a T50. That's what fits in that guy. So you can pull this out. At the same time, we're going to want to hold on to this gear. I don't think it's actually, you know what, it's not going to go anywhere. So, continue pulling that out. Is it going to drop? No. So there's the bolt that keeps it in. So now that's just sitting there. Just grab it, wiggle it around, it'll drop off, and we pull it out. Reverse idler. Alright, so we got our reverse light switch out. It's got a little spring-loaded ball in the end. That's the switch. Works the same as the detents. And that comes out of this hole right here, just behind the control housing. So right there, it's threaded, as you can see. This here, speedometer sensor. So runs right off a gear on the diff, and it's held in by a little. It's got a little eye here. A little 10mm bolt goes through that. And yeah, that comes out right here, right above the differential. So next, what we'll do is we'll take the detents out and the control housing, and then we'll be just about ready to split this thing. Alright, so that's what the detents look like. Little 19mm head bolt. It's got the same little spring-loaded ball bearing on the end, and that's where they go. These holes here, unused on this chassis. These two are for the transmission mount, as well as these two right here. These 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, are for your shift rail detents. So make sure you pop them out before attempting to split the case. Now we're going to work on the control housing, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, so what I'm doing here is there's a couple of bolts right here that hold your side-to-side shift lever on to the control housing. You want to take those out, and you'll see a little piece fell off. I'll show you what that was. So there we go. That's your one shift lever. This guy here, a little bushing, goes in this groove right here. That's what allows the other lever to push and pull this lever in and out of the transmission. And then obviously this is your gear selector. So this guy here, get rid of that bolt. This guy here is the main culprit when your gear shifter doesn't return to center. This is the guy right here. Okay, look. I've only got one hand to do this, but let's see if I can get it off. There we go. Little black cap exposes the nut. Pull that off. Take that nut off. The torque's in the service manual, or I can post it up sometime. But take that little nut off. There's some bushings in there. Lube them up real good. Keep this little hinge so it's easy to turn, and you won't have any problems with a sticky shifter. A lot of guys think it's the spring on the actual shifter itself inside the car in the center console, but that little spring does do in fact just that. However, if this is seized, the spring will be unable to overcome the force necessary. So keep an eye out for that. That's the guy you gotta look after. On the car, transmission's in the car. It's kind of hard to do this, but you can get it off. A little bit of a pain in the ass, but yeah, not too bad. So we'll set that aside. With all the hardware, we don't want to lose nothing, forget anything. So there. So now all 4 of these bolts are exposed. We can go ahead, pull all 4 of those off, and remember the retaining bolt as well, and then we'll be able to slide this whole unit out. Okay, so here we are. I broke the seal here on the control housing, and I broke the torque on the retaining bolt. So just pull this out. And you'll notice, oh, there it is, the tip of this bolt is smooth, and once we pull this out, you'll see where that goes. So this, a little tricky to come off. There's little alignment pins or dowels there. So basically, I just slide this out. That's the control housing. You see, I just lay this down here. See, when you shift gears, you're just moving that lever back and forth. See here, that's your in and out return spring, which is actually your on the gear shifter is your up and down between the gears. And then here have your reverse lockout, so you can't go from 5th gear into reverse. That's what makes it go straight down into 4th if you're downshifting from 5th gear. So this little you call that like a sear, I guess, and that'll catch on this and won't let you go into reverse from 5th gear, which makes sense. I don't want to do that. So there it is. So that goes back and forth, and I don't know if you can see that, but you got little channels in your shift rail, so you're just basically pushing them to and fro. So that's the control housing. One last thing to do before we split this thing is, again, first we gotta take all these case bolts out. I took the ones in the bell housing out already, so I just have to pull all these ones off. And then this cap, we'll take that off, and that's where there's a big snap ring in here, and that's what retains the outside bearing on the output shaft. So loosen these off, pop this off, spread the snap ring, let the shaft drop, and then this half of the case should come right off. Okay, so here we go. Broke all the torques on all the bolts, so you can go ahead, pull them out. Alright, so got all our case bolts out. As I said earlier, there are at least several. Now, don't worry about keeping these separate. They're all exactly the same size, even the 2 inside the bell housing. So those we can set aside. And now we got to remove this cap. Now this part's kind of weird because, I mean, you can try to get it out, you know, nicely, but even by Mitsubishi's suggestions, the procedure is to just take a screwdriver, stab it through the center of this cap, and then remove it that way. So we'll go ahead and do that. Just going to set the camera down for a moment. Alright, so what I've done here is stabbed a screwdriver through it, pry it out, just like that. Knock it off. I don't know if you can see this. Get the trouble light here so you can get a better look at it. There is the top of the snap ring, and what we want to do is we want to spread those jaws and that's actually retaining the output shaft bearing, which you'll see a little later when we pull the case off. So right now all we got to do is split that ring, let the shaft drop. If it doesn't drop, you may have to pry it a little bit, but it will drop. And then once that's disconnected, because this snap ring stays in this end of the case, so that's the only thing holding the transmission together right now. So I'll grab some snap ring pliers and we'll get to it. Alright, here we are. There's the snap ring. As you can see, I released it and the bearing dropped. It's kind of hard to see that, but the bearing did drop. The snap ring is no longer in its groove, but I'm just going to show you guys a couple of ways to do this. If you don't have snap ring pliers, a regular cheap pair of needle nose. It's kind of harder, but rather than squeezing, you got to open. So you can just do that, and then you can, spread the handle. So rather than squeezing to spread, you have to spread to spread. So it's a little bit trickier, but it'll work. Even worse yet, if you don't have needle nose pliers, which everyone should, but you can use a pair of screwdrivers. What you do, you just stick them in there like that, and then I'm going to put the hammer down. You get something to go in between the screwdrivers so it fits nice and snug. And then you gotta line it up, and this is really tricky because these are 3 tools that have nothing to do with one another. So you can see I stuck a chisel in between 2 screwdrivers. Screwdrivers are in the snap ring, and believe it or not, you can thread the snap ring like so. So once that's dropped, then there's nothing else holding this in the case, and we can grab a pry bar or a large common screwdriver, which I seem to have misplaced. Anyway, here's a chisel, and there's a couple little ears here. You break the seal, then remember this sits on a couple I don't know if you can see this. There's a couple dowels here, so you gotta kind of wrestle it up, and there we go. Split the case. That's the inside of that case, and set that aside. And here we have the inside of the transmission. So here's your final drive and your diff and all that. Output shaft, input shaft. Here's your rails. Get some light over here. So these little grooves here, that's where the control housing slides the forks up and down. You can see if you slide a fork up and down, it moves the sleeve on the gear and selects the gear. These little cutouts, those are where the detents go in. So you have a neutral position, then you have a first and second, and then neutral again. Then you have fifth, reverse, neutral, and third and fourth and neutral. And those are all all the little cutouts on the rails here. So the only thing holding all of this in to the case still, believe it or not, is this little retaining ring here. You can see there's 1, 2, 3 bolts. That retains your input shaft bearing, and you pull those 3 bolts out, and both of these shafts, the 3 rails plus all 3 shift forks, you can pull them out off of this case as a unit. Keep them all together, unless you're disassembling the shafts to replace synchros or worn gears or what have you. You can just leave all these shafts meshed. You can leave them with the gears meshed as they are bar here with the rails all together, and then the diff here you see is just free floating in here. So if you pull these gears out, and all that's holding that in is that retaining bracket on the input shaft bearing. Once you pull that off, you pull both these shafts out, and then you're left with your diff. And that, you just grab it by the bearing here. It's hard to get your fingers around the side of the gear, but you just grab it, lift it right out. It's just free floating in there. The only thing keeping it in is the preload. Obviously, is keeping it tight. The bearings keep it straight, and then it just meshes with these, which have their own little housings that they're into, and that's it. That's how you take this apart. Alright, so it's really heavy. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're taking this ring off, the retaining plate for the input shaft. You probably can't see this right now, but this one's kind of hard to get at. Even my gear wrench won't fit on it. The transmission gears get in the way, but should be able to pull that out by hand now. Alright, so case bolt. Oh, big pile of them there. Same thing with this one. Just turn these bolts off. That should be enough. So we can just pull these out. 1, 2, and that comes off. Now there is literally nothing holding this in now. So I'm gonna move this. I'm gonna grab a couple of semi-clean shop towels. These shafts aren't getting reused. Third gear is destroyed. Probably show that in a later video, but basically all we do now is you grab the whole assembly, wiggle it, a little tricky, just keep wiggling, and there it goes. Input shaft, output shaft, shift rails. You can lay that down, and you see they all fit together. Now they're kind of fell apart here, but some light.